Hi, everyone. I'd like to do a shout out to our sponsor, Baco Diagnostics. Early detection is the single most important factor in improving patient outcomes. The Baco Diagnostics team recognizes how impactful a podiatric physician can be and remains committed to supporting you in your role as the first line of defense in diagnosing conditions of the lower extremity. Thanks to the unwavering support of their clients, Baco Diagnostics has been able to give back to the podiatric community for 16 years by providing podiatric educational resources and advocating for the position. Baco Diagnostics, helping podiatric physicians keep America on its feet. If you have not yet had the opportunity to utilize Baco Diagnostics services, get started today by sending an email to corporaterations@bacodiagnostics.com. The first 50 podiatry offices who request a starter kit will receive a Dean's Chat mug. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Dean's Chat, where we discuss all things podiatric medicine. My name is Dr. Jeffrey Jensen. I'm the Dean at the Arizona College of Podiatric Medicine and the host for the Dean's Chat podcast. Once again, I'm with my co-host, Dr. Joanna Richey. Hi, Joe.
Hey, Jeff. How you doing?
I'm doing great. I see you're sporting the Baco vest this morning.
Yes, it's still very cold and a little bit of rain, actually. If the rain had come this time last week, it literally would have snowed in Phoenix because it was cold enough that it would have supported that. But alas, just cold today and wet.
I've got my vest on too. I'm ready. So yeah. We've got a fantastic guest today. He's an alumni, previous student of mine at the Arizona College of Podiatric Medicine. He did his residency in Texas at Baylor Scott and White. Fabulous residency program. And then he went on to become faculty at the Rio Grande Valley College of Podiatric Medicine. Welcome to Dean's Chat, Dr. Michael Higham.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
No, it's a pleasure. Thank you. It's kind of tradition on Dean's Chat. We're low key. Go first names, if that's okay with you, Michael, Joe, and Jeff.
Yeah.
All right. Sounds good. Well, I kind of gave you a little bit of an intro there. I've got the picture of you wearing the Total Contact cast right next to my desk on the shelf. So I was showing Joe today at the office. I said, this is who we're interviewing today. It seems like it was yesterday.
Seems like just yesterday, doesn't it?
It does. Well, I think where I'd like to start, Michael, if it's all right with you, I was so proud of you when I heard you became faculty as an assistant professor at the Rio Grande Valley College. I just thought, wow, rightfully so. Congratulations. But how did you fall into that? Because it's not often that a new graduate from a 3-year surgical training program gets a faculty position. So how did that play out for you?
Oh, man. So I guess it's a bit of a long story, but I've always kind of enjoyed academia and always wanted to get back into academia. And so I had I want to say I got lucky, but admittedly, I would say if you're interested in getting into academia or any field for that matter, invest in your relationships because it's sometimes not so much what you know, but who you know. And Dr. Shibuya was my attending at Baylor Scott and White. And I was volunteering at a TPMA conference of all things. And he essentially just approached me and said, hey, we're looking for somebody. Would you be interested? And I jumped at the opportunity. So
that's fabulous. And note you were volunteering when it happened. So
exactly.
Kind of line up. Dr. Shibuya is no stranger to Dean's Chat, Joe.
Yep.
Yeah, we love Dr. Shibuya. Just as a fun side note, I had met him initially at an AO event that they were getting ready to do the courses that were coming up. And we kind of bonded over dinner, having a very nerdy discussion about bivariate analysis and multivariable regression analysis. And I thought, you know what? This is the perfect person to be running the journal of the American College of Foot and Ankle Surgeons. Like, yep. He is exactly the person, because who else gets to geek out over dinner on statistics? So,
yeah, we had one of the big draws to Baylor Scott and White was he ran the journal club, and I was like, this is perfect. This is amazing because I also enjoyed geeking out on some of the statistics, and so that was a big reason why I picked the program because I wanted to meet him and get to know him a little bit better.
Yeah. And he's such a humble guy. Like you would never know he's as
Right.
accomplished as he is just sitting and talking to him. So I like to shout out for him every time we get the chance. So
Yeah. Amen. Me too.
So Michael, in your new role as an assistant professor at the college, what are your responsibilities? How does that play out at the University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley?
Yeah. So I do a little bit of clinic and then a little bit of teaching. So on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, I'm in the clinic. Um, and or surgery. And then Tuesdays and Thursdays, I'll be teaching. Um, so when I first started, I got thrown into sports medicine. They made me module lead over the sports med course. And so I got to put that together and then just writing questions and writing lectures and interacting with students and mentoring and all of the above. And I'm now on a couple committees and enjoying the input I get to have there. So, but a little bit of everything.
No, that's great. Joe and I are fully committed to getting on not only committees within the college, but committees within the university. And that people often wonder what a professor does, and certainly the committee work and all the things that make a university system flourish really lay at the foundation of the faculty. So that's neat that you're doing that. What kind of committees are you on right now?
So right now, clinical subcommittee. So we currently have a third year cohort, and we're trying to work out all of the wrinkles of trying to get affiliation agreements and all of the above. So on that clinical subcommittee, and then also the curriculum committee. And I spent a little bit of time with promotions committee, kind of disciplinary committee, short term. But during the curriculum committee, we often will try and get, so we call it vertical and longitudinal integration, right? Trying to get the courses to line up in such a way that you have things make sense, right? You can't teach biomechanics until you've had some form of anatomy, because you have to know the bones before you can know how they move. So that kind of a thing. We're meeting Wednesday for the curriculum committee, and then the promotions committee was all regarding trying to help students, whether they're successful or struggling, get back to where they need to be to meet the standards that they need to hit to succeed.
That makes sense. Joe, your thoughts?
yeah, I'm curious, Mike, what your experience has been as now, and I will full disclaimer, we were the second class at Midwestern. So I very much remember the growing pains of being new. As you've been looking at setting up some of these outside rotations, both podiatric and non, I actually think it's really valuable that you are still very close or early in your career. So very close to going through a lot of this, because I think there's a lot of insight there. But I'm curious what your experience has been as you have been helping students navigate some of this, but then on the other side as a faculty member, what that has kind of looked like and been like as seeing the way the sausage is made.
Sure. It's been a really valuable experience, honestly. I mean, the students, I had mentors, right? When I went to Arizona, I had upperclassmen I could rely on when it was like, hey, what do I do for this rotation? And the inevitable questions. So I've been able to hopefully answer a couple for a few of them and be a mentor that way. As far as setting up these rotations, I had no idea the degree of logistics that happens behind the scenes. And now that I'm a little bit more privy to it, I think I also appreciate more everything that was put in place to make sure that it ran smoothly. But yeah, it's an interesting dynamic having just come out because I did just go through it. So hopefully can provide some insight. But yeah, we'll let the students decide on that one.
You know,
And I
Michael.
think,
Oh,
sorry,
go
sorry,
ahead.
Jen. I think having you being a young faculty member is very valuable for that exact reason. If the only faculty that they had at the Texas school right now were those that had 10, 15 years experience, it's not that the students can't relate to that, but it's a different kind of relationship than someone who just went through some of these things and can answer what it's like to be on an externship and what it was like to go through the interview process for residency. And even though, again, you've gone through residency, you've graduated, there's something different about 4 years of experience, we'll say, compared to 14. And so I actually think it's
Sure.
a really exceptional opportunity in this particular situation too, that these students can benefit from your experience, even if it's relatively new experience. New experience carries value here because you remember what it was like going through the new application cycle, the new way that CRIP is done, the new, and I say new, and it's not that new, but it's very different than when I went through it 14 years ago or 15 years ago. So
Sure.
as you have made that transition, what are some, sorry, Jeff, I'm going to ask a piggyback question as I like to do with some of these. What has been something that has been a little challenging as you've been making that transition from residency now to full-time clinical faculty,
Sure.
faculty, assistant professor?
Well, I think that something I've been learning is that the learning curves never seem to stop. You know, your first year of medical or podiatry school, you're just swimming in information, and I'll speak for myself here, but had a little bit of imposter syndrome. It was like, man, do I belong here? Um, I sat on the front row that first day, and I was talking with some of the peers just next to me, and I realized that three of the individuals, I think there were five of us on that row, three of them were valedictorian of their college. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I don't belong here. So I definitely have a decent amount of empathy for that learning curve because I just went through it. But I feel like it's during those uncomfortable times where you're growing the most. Um, and I would say for me, the three big ones were first starting school, and then rotations, residency, and now I guess four, not counting so well, but the fourth one is being an attending. It's you get so confident in your third year, you're like, oh yeah, I can manage anything. I can do most things surgically pretty easily. But then when it's the onus is completely on you, it's like, oh man, you start second guessing yourself. So yeah, that perspective is pretty fresh for me, definitely. And hopefully it comes with a dose of humility. So
I was going to say, it sounds like you're a normal human being there, Mike. That's exactly what happens, right? Every step of the way, it's a new learning curve, and that seems very steep. And but think about where you are now. My goodness. So let's shift back a little bit. Let's talk. Let's go back to the beginning. Let's talk about your undergrad and how you found out about podiatric medicine, and then why you decided to attend the Arizona College. Maybe that'd be a good place to springboard.
sure. So I ran track and cross country. I actually played a lot of sports growing up. And then as it goes, I had some friends that joined track, and so I ditched soccer and baseball and football and everything else. And I was like, you know what, I'm going to be a runner now. Got into track and cross country, and I feel like, as cliche as it sounds, I got injured and got introduced in a roundabout way to podiatry. I actually went to a sporting goods store and, on recommendation of the shoe salesman there, swapped my shoes and found out over the course of the next month I became injury free. And I was like, this is amazing. And I kind of fell in love with biomechanics before I even knew what podiatry was. And so a few years later, I was selling shoes at that same store and got to talk with Ultra was making shoes. And at the time, the book Born to Run had just come out, and I had been reading, the Foot book by Peter Kavanaugh, and I was like, well, okay, let's try and make sense of this. And with Ultra being there, I got to talk with some of their representatives as they were making shoes. And I was doing a biomechanical evaluation actually on a client at the running shoe store. And they made the comment that I sounded just like their podiatrist. And I was like, what the heck's a podiatrist? And come to find out that my mom knew Dr. Huff and Dr. Edwards really well. And so I got in and started shadowing, and the rest is history, I guess. But yeah, sports medicine was kind of my route into podiatry, and serendipity would have it that that's the course I got when I got here. So, but yeah, that's my love, and that's what got me into podiatry. I actually coached cross country for a while, and with Ultra, I got to give some input when they were making their shoes. So that's my claim to fame.
Didn't that book used to talk about the Tahamar Indians and how they used to do those 100-mile runs and tire with a strap?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the Born to Run. It's kind of the evolutionary approach, I guess, to biomechanics, and how, the big shoe companies are making us all pseudo-neuropathic, and so we don't get the feedback, and so our mechanics are poor and we end up injured because of it. So I think there's some merit there, but that's a soapbox I won't get on.
Just as a sidebar, though, I used to be one of the medical people at the Leadville Trail 100-mile run in Colorado, and the Tarahumara Indians would come up and participate in the race. And as part of the, what we would do is we'd weigh them, and we'd take their pulse, and they'd get a wristband, and they all weighed like 125 pounds. And when I was taking their pulse, it was like 32 beats per minute, 34 beats. Yeah. And it's just fascinating, the lifestyle and how they lived and how they ran, and just incredible. But a lot of that, that lifestyle is fascinating. It's gotten more and more acceptable, if you will.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And some of the more newer literature has been really fascinating out of University of Calgary with Ben O'Nig. And then I don't know if you've seen, they actually have YouTube videos. Dr. Uchida, I think, the biomechanics of movement, and Scott Delp out of Stanford, they have some YouTube videos that are really fascinating. That I found very, very interesting recently, that I've, I don't know, kind of tie those two together a little bit more.
Makes sense. And as a small world would have it, did you shadow with Dr. Huff and Dr. Edwards?
I did, yeah. I spent a decent amount of time, and actually, because of rotation, so on rotations, unfortunately, COVID hit my 3rd and 4th year. So I had 5 months cancel on me, and trying to scramble to find programs, and Dr. Huff actually took me in for a month, and I rotated just in his clinic for a month. So both Dr. Edwards and Dr. Huff were a huge reason why I ended up in this field.
That was a wild time. Joe, your thoughts on, you were teaching at Samuel Merritt at the time, right? During COVID?
I got brought back in at that time because I had moved, and I had offered to whatever I could do to support. And at the time, virtual just wasn't in the vision, which I totally get. And then it was a little bit comical because it was at a peak of my own kind of exhaustion from all of the things that were COVID. And it was, hey, you remember that offer about virtual teaching? Do you think you might still be interested? And it was just like gut, like typing in yes, like I need something else to help right now. And it saved me as much as I think it helped them. So it was wild.
So Michael, you matched at Baylor Scott and White.
Yeah.
So during that time, did you have an opportunity to clerk with them, or was that put on hold also?
Yeah, so actually was my first clerkship was at Baylor Scott and White.
Got it.
And I got to see it pre-COVID. COVID actually swept through Texas while I was on rotation. So halfway through the month, we got kicked out, and they said no more students at the hospital. We're saving all the PPE for the docs and residents, and so I finished that rotation virtually, and Dr. Sadowskis would send us topics. He would be like, okay, I want to lecture on stage 2 PTTD surgical intervention. And so I would send a presentation, which in hindsight now I'm like, well, maybe that prepped me for for now. Yeah, I finished that rotation just sending lectures to the program director. So it really was a wild time. It was, I drove back home and finished the lecture from home.
So tell us about interviews, how you ended up at Baylor Scott and White. What was the process for you? How many programs did you interview with? How many did you rank? Those are just classic questions that students that'll be watching this episode will be asking.
Sure. So I interviewed at all of the programs that I went to. I also took a couple additional interviews, and from recommendation of some upperclassmen and some mentors, I ranked a lot of programs. I started Baylor Scott and White was my number one. I ranked them. St. Vincent with Dr. DeHeer, he was very generous during that time that everybody was canceling for rotations. I think we had like 8 or so students that rotated that month at that hospital because he was just like, well, I guess everybody come here. But had a fantastic month there. But yeah, I ranked probably around 9 or 10 different programs, I would think. And luckily, I landed where I wanted to go, which was Baylor Scott and White. So
That's interesting. I have students all the time ask, how does this play out exactly? You go to your clerkships, you're going to interview with them. You spent a month essentially in an audition rotation, and then you go to do interviews and you sign up for programs that you didn't clerk at. In the old days, that's how you did it. Nowadays, that's a little bit different. I mean, Joe, you had a similar experience, right? I mean, you did mostly clerkships, or did you interview at a bunch of programs that you didn't clerk at?
So we only had 3 externship opportunities when I was a student. So, and I know there are some schools that only have 3 or 4 externship opportunities prior to interviews. So again, not wanting to speak too broadly, I don't ever think it's bad to interview. And certainly if it comes up like, oh, why didn't you extern with our program? There are a lot of reasons that may or may not work out either on the student or the program's end. So I don't ever think it's wrong. But what I have told students, and Mike, I'm sure I'd love to get your take on if this was an experience you had the value of just a visit. And actually this morning I was looking at the AACPM residency website. There are programs that will even say sometimes like, look, we understand the cost associated with visiting, that sometimes it doesn't work out, but they actually have written an invitation. We're happy to set up a virtual meeting and just get to know you better. So I think now, again, this is where I'd love to get your take, Mike, having more opportunities to engage with each other, build these, you had commented on relationships. What do you see for some of the future in terms of how externships go and the need for a full month externship versus having other opportunities to engage with programs?
yeah, I think that visiting is very valuable. Actually, because I had so many months cancel on me, I was able, once COVID tamed down a little bit, I was able to get out to a number of programs and just visit for a day or two. And admittedly, I don't know, I would be interested to hear your thoughts on optimal timeline, but I feel like you can get a good sense of a program in 24 to 48 hours. I don't think you need a ton of time. And so there were some months that were 5-month rotations. And the last week of the rotation, the program would just say, you know what, we do 4-week rotations, so you're good to go. And so that would be when I would scramble and see how many spots I could hit before I made it to my next rotation. And I feel like that was really valuable. I had friends that actually matched at programs that they rotated, or they didn't rotate at, but they visited. So I would highly recommend that if you're in that process, go and visit as many as you can.
And sometimes they can't necessarily offer you an entire day to come visit. But even so, I've told students, I think a half a day. I think honestly, even just you get invited, oh, you can come to our grand rounds at 6 a.m., right? Being able to see how residents interact with attendings, how the attendings interact with each other, what the engagement, if there's anyone else in the room, right? Do they have general surgery residents or ortho residents, or what does this grand rounds thing look like? Can give you some information as a student. Maybe you won't know for sure, oh, this is my program, but you might know this is not my program. Like this,
Yeah.
I don't thrive in this kind of a situation, or this, the way that the interactions are. But it can also give you just enough to be like, you know what, I really liked that. On my way back home, I'd love to try to stop back in again. And again, you're just trying to make these little touch points, these little opportunities to engage with each other, build some relationship, so that when you do have the chance to interview and you get asked, oh, you did an extern with us, they may already be like, oh, we remember this student. You came by a couple times. And I definitely think that that was useful for me, since we didn't have as many full months. I couldn't spend a whole day everywhere, but I did drive up the coast. And so I would try to hit a couple here and there. And there were some grand rounds experiences that were enough for me to be like, this is a great program, but it's not great for my learning style and how I want to interact necessarily with the attendings. And it was enough to help me know, do I want to spend more time visiting and doing that, or do I want to check something else out? So
Absolutely. And I think that's key. The fit for yourself is just as important as the quality of the program, because I heard really good things from people, and then I went and I was like, you know, I can see why this is alluring, but also at the same time, I don't see myself fitting in here as well as maybe others. So yeah, I liked what you said there. For sure.
It's so valuable, because some students are thinking, well, I don't like this. Is it me, or is it the program? It's just the way it works sometimes.
Yeah.
So when one of the things we like to do is interview residents and talk about residency programs. Can you kind of give us an overview of Baylor Scott and White, what it's like from when you get there for orientation, and each year how it progresses, and then at the end of the day, how you felt about the training?
Yeah. Well, I'll give my sales pitch, I guess. Don't let anyone dissuade you from going there. I loved my training there. I think one of the big draws for me was Dr. Shibuya, but also the degree of the academia is very heavy there. They have a lot of journal clubs, a lot of grand rounds, we do what's called a pre-op, post-op conference every Monday, where we talk about just what went well or what we're planning on doing for the next week of surgeries. And I felt like it was very valuable just hearing the attendings interacting. There was a decent amount of pimping going on, which I felt I needed to help push me to continue learning. So, but from day one, your first year, I feel like you're off service more than you are on service. And so internal medicine rotations and, endocrinology or anesthesia or radiology, all of these rotations. One of the things I liked about the program is there's over 100 medical residents at the hospital. And so every attending loved to teach. And so, and they were very used to residents, and they treated you just like any other medical resident. And so when I was in the emergency department, I was an emergency department resident. When I was in internal medicine, I was an internal medicine resident. And so that was something I found very, very valuable. And as the years progressed, we went a little bit more clinic to heavy surgical. So by the time I was hitting my third year, I was actually looking back over some of my logs because I just had to submit them to a hospital for privileges. And that last week, I think I had 16 cases, and they were all, talus fractures and ankle fractures, total ankle replacements, bigger cases. But they are really good at not throwing you in. And that was a big thing that I found valuable. I had some colleagues that they wanted to be thrown in and feel the pressure, and that was how they learned. I felt like, patient care needed to be always first, and that was something I felt like Baylor Scott and White did really well. If you weren't comfortable, they would help you get comfortable. And then once you were, they gave you the reins and let you run. So yeah, that's why I picked that program.
That's great. We always speak so highly of the Texas programs, and Baylor Scott and White is certainly one of them. Joe, your thoughts?
Yeah, I would love to explore a couple more questions or thoughts on residency, but do we want to have a little shout out to our sponsor, Jeff?
I think we should.
We're in that kind of halfway mark.
Thank you. Yeah, it's always good to shout out our sponsor, Baco Diagnostics. We all know that early detection is the most important determination in improving patient outcomes. Baco Diagnostics remains committed to supporting you in your role as the first line of defense in diagnosing lower extremity pathologies. Baco Diagnostics, helping podiatric physicians keep America on its feet. And Michael, you'll recall the derm lab with Baco Diagnostics and all the biopsy techniques with Dr. Shear.
Yeah, they've been very, very helpful with funding as well for it. So I'm part of TPMA, which is our state medical association, and yeah, we love Baco. They help us out in many ways, and with the school as well. Trying to get 4 biopsies, trying to get limbs or pig's feet and supplies and all of that. They've really supported our profession, so I'm grateful for Baco.
Yeah,
Yeah,
go ahead.
I say I'm going to table my piggyback question off of that, because in terms of how much Baco supports our students and opportunities for hands-on things, I'm gonna save that for just a second and go back to Jeff's original question about residency. And I loved what you had talked about, that your residency program, one thing that you noticed as a student, as you were going through, is you were able to identify, this is something that I need to help keep me kind of pushing me forward, but also I need someone that's going to help me get to where I feel comfortable rather than Geronimo jump off the cliff. What are some tips or insights that you offer students? How do they start to ask themselves those questions? Or what are some good ways for them to kind of start that introspective experience of what do you need to learn in something like a residency program?
I mean, part of it will just come with experience, I guess. The more programs you see, the more questions you'll have. And so again, it goes back to visiting is important, but I definitely feel like, I think it was Oscar Wilde, the Irish playwright. He said, "Show me your friends and I'll show you your future." I feel very strongly that your relationship with the individuals at the program makes all the difference in the world. So when I went to Baylor Scott and White, there was actually a tornado that blew through, and I took my family with me, and we were in a little 18-foot trailer. We were staying actually at an RV park. And the director at the time, Dr. Murdoch, actually called me and said, "Hey, we know that we have these high wind speeds. I just wanted to invite you and your family over to my house to sleep." And it was just kind of like, it opened my eyes to how much Dr. Murdoch and the faculty cared about me, not just academically, but as an individual. And so that was one thing that drew me to the program as well, as I felt like there was a lot of authenticity. The people were very genuine. And so I was trying to pick friends and future colleagues that shared the same values and aspirations and maybe saw my potential. I felt like that was very, very important to surround myself with those individuals.
Oh, I like that. Like just seeing this is what I want to be like. I want to emulate these mannerisms. I think that's actually incredibly insightful. Finding the people that look like are doing what you want to do. They're performing and talking and acting the way you want to eventually be. I think that's really great advice.
Yeah.
I love how you brought Oscar Wilde into it. That's fabulous. That's just a
And,
great line.
yeah.
Joe, you were going to talk about Baco for a second.
So yeah, so in this kind of transitioning maybe from residency into now your current role, what are some of the things that you're most so Baco provides so many opportunities for students to have hands-on engagement. What are the things you're most excited about in terms of the curriculum that you've developed for your sports medicine course? What are the things that in the future you think are going to be where education is going? Like, what are the things that get you really excited?
So I would say the things that get me really excited are those little moments where you see the light bulbs going off. Um, so the classroom setting, obviously, we try and do, we have the traditional setup where lecture and then all of the students, but we also like to do small group sessions and kind of break out into these and do clinical scenarios so that they can take what we're trying to teach them and apply it. And Dr. Hamilton, I know with AO and yourself, that's been something that has had very positive feedback. And so trying to incorporate that a little bit more. So for sports med, we did kinesiology, taping, and ultrasound workshops, right? And Dr. Tassone is here, so I asked if he would come help us with the ultrasound side of things. And we tried to take, I guess, some of what we were learning and say, hey, when we go out to, so last week we were at a marathon last weekend, right? We took the students and rather they invited me. They set up the whole thing. They invited me and we went out to a marathon. And beforehand, we talked about taping for acute injuries and kind of some of the recovery for the subacute injuries. So just translating the lecture to the physical has always been something that I feel like I get more of those light bulbs. And so I feel like that has been the most rewarding.
It's excellent.
I think that's so true. I mean, we even saw that, Michael, at the college, right? When we opened up that brand new lab, you were off on COVID, but it's been a transforming event for our college because we can take what you're learning in lecture and transition into a hands-on experience in the lab, and then hopefully do the same thing at a marathon or Special Olympics or something. So, yeah, there's a lot to be said for that experience. So I'm with you.
Yeah, I think I got a couple um, uh, labs in the new lab right before we left. So it's really a fantastic facility.
Yeah, I think didn't we have a whole month where we had you guys come back and we kept putting lab after lab after lab that you had missed during COVID, and then we
Yeah,
did. I remember that. That was. It seems like yesterday, but it seems a long time ago at the same time.
doesn't it? Yeah, it blends together. I feel like the days are long, but the weeks and years are short.
Absolutely. On the personal level, how old are your children now, Mike?
Yeah, so I have a slew. I got four. So my oldest is just turned 10 and my youngest is 2. So I have a David is 10, Maddie is 7, Emery is just turned 5, and then I have a 2-year-old. So um, and I took them all across the country for all my externships. So um, yeah, I'm lucky they stuck with me, I guess.
There'll be great memories as
Yeah,
they
well,
grow.
actually,
And
it was really
yeah.
funny. So when we sold the 18-foot trailer, which we lived in for a while, my daughter, Maddie, was just so sad. She was like, but that's our home, you know.
Oh, yeah.
We actually sold it to a cousin. When we went back, she was so excited to get back in the 18-foot trailer for camping.
It's awesome. She'll want to live in a tiny house when she grows up.
Maybe.
That's so fantastic. So let's talk about some personal things. You know, you're interested in triathlons, and you said musicals and different types of books. Have you done some triathlons, Michael?
Yeah. So I'll admit I've been out of it a little bit. You know, residency, you need to take care of yourself, but it gets kind of hard when the weeks get long. So I haven't done a lot recently, but I used to, like I said, I ran track and cross country, helped coach for a little while, high school team just over the summer. Um, and then because I was injured, I started doing cross training, right? And then the cross training turned into, well, I guess I could swim and run, and I guess I'll throw in a bike in there too. My dad's big into cycling, and so he gave me his old bike, and so I've done a handful of triathlons. But I'll tell you what, getting out now, I gained probably 40 pounds or so over the course of residency, and it hurts, man. It's not as fun as it used to be. So, but you know, trying to get out, get after it again.
You know, I would imagine the McAllen, Harlingen area is kind of a hotbed for swimming, running, biking.
Yeah. Like I said, we were just at the marathon in McAllen last weekend, I want to say. And you know, San Antonio rocking the whatever it's called, I'm blanking on the name, just did their last one. So they're actually making a new marathon coming up next year. So, and then trying to get incorporated with the Special Olympics here. They also have Fit Feet. And so it's something, I think it's coming up in 2 or 3 weeks. They have an event. So we're getting out and we're hitting all the races, doing a little marketing on the side. You know, my daughter was out there. Actually, I had a stack of business cards because the clinic's been a little bit on the slower side, and so we were handing out business cards left and right, and she was having a blast handing them out.
Future podiatrist.
Yeah, yeah, future podiatrist or you know, chief of marketing. I'll hire her for that.
There you go. I like
She
that.
was so cute, nobody could say no.
That's
So.
right.
Of course, it's like when we're buying the Girl Scout cookies, Joe. I got a whole house full of thin mints right now.
Yeah.
It's my 6-year-old, man. She is a hustler. We had some booths over the weekend, and whew, that girl. I thought she was going to be shy, and like we'd have to like help her come out of her shell. She learned very quickly how to come out of her shell. So, yeah.
That's fabulous. So Michael, one of the things that Joe and I have been doing at the end of our interviews are just some quick questions and kind of get a just on the spot, quick answers. So yeah, I'll kick it off, Joe. You said you're interested in musicals. What's your favorite musical?
Oh, favorite musical. That's hard. I would say favorite musical I've been in was Seven Brides for Seven Brothers, because I did it with my wife. I've been in a handful of just community theater. I did some theater in high school. But that one was favorite because I got to do it with my wife. I was actually across from her, so that was a lot of fun. Um, but overall, favorite music right now, Wicked. I mean, Come on.
Oh,
I love Wicked. It was the first show I ever got to see that was the Broadway cast. And I remember right before intermission is Defying Gravity. And I was just like, my hair was on end. I was crying. I was like, what is happening? So that's what made me fall in love with musicals. So I would say Wicked right now, for sure.
That's fabulous.
so we're gonna stick on the music theme. What music do you listen to in the OR? Or like in
I'm
your
still
office
figuring
when you
that
put
out,
lectures
actually.
together? Yeah, it
Um,
could be either one.
yeah, so funny story. I like listening to a lot of things from classical to like old hip hop. So I'm still trying to figure out what I want to listen to in the OR because before I just listened to whatever the attending was listening to. Right now I've kind of been deferring to the scrub techs or circulating nurse. So yeah, but
Yeah.
I
I
would think.
still remember the day I got to pick the music, and it was the most exciting.
Well, I'm just so undecided, I guess. I've been deferring.
Try a little bit of it out, like a little bit of all of it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I love it.
So, Michael, you get a babysitter and it's date night. What kind of food are you and your wife going out for?
Oh man. Um, you know, uh, normally if we're going on a date night, we're going to like a movie or a show or something else. Normally we just grab something on the way. So, um, I would say, as lame as it sounds, like Panda or something that we would just grab in the car.
There you go.
All right, so something you talked a little bit about cross country when you were a kid, something from your childhood that you loved doing that you no longer do. You don't have to want to do it again, but just something that you loved doing when you were younger.
Um, Oh man, something I loved doing. I would say soccer. I loved soccer growing up.
Yeah.
Um, but and I was on a team for a short little while. When I was in residency, they had like a little club team, and I did that for a little bit, but it's just hard to find opportunities. You would think in South Texas with the uh, all of the Latino influence that we would have a lot of soccer clubs here, but yeah, maybe someday.
I forgot to ask you this earlier. So this isn't quite fun, but it is kind of fun. Where do you see your research career going as a faculty member?
Well, so not something that I did a whole lot of in residency. Dr. Shibuya actually has me getting back on city and NFAR registry and all of that. Because he's gung ho about it. So honestly, wherever he wants to go, I'll probably just grab his coattails and hang on for dear life.
There you
What
go.
mentors are wonderful for, right? Helping us
Exactly, exactly.
ignite passion and interest. And so
Yep.
I think that's an excellent answer.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Mike, I can't remember an interview where we touched on, his recent schooling, residency, faculty members, research. I just think it's fabulous. Thank you so much for joining us, and I look forward to hopefully having you on Dean's Chat again down the road.
Well, thanks again for having me. Really, it's been fun. I started binge watching these after you reached out to me, and I was like, oh, okay. Well, but yeah, it was a little daunting as well, the caliber of people you've had on here. I'm like, oh, who am I? I'm a nobody, but I appreciate you having me.
Well, it's great to have you, and we look forward to following your career for sure. And Michael, we're going to send you one of these Dean's Chat cups, and that way, beverage of choice, right? Get the day rolling.
Yeah, appreciate it.
All right. Well, thank you again. And gosh, you know what? I forgot to ask one more thing. Might I have to ask one more question, Joe?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay. So let's say, Michael, because we're all in the same boat in academics, let's say that you have a student that's interested in podiatric medicine. What do you tell them about our profession?
So, um, we do this pretty regularly because recruitment right now is a very hot topic. But I would say that podiatry is one of the best fields because of the variety that of things you can do with the degree, right? So If you want to be a biomechanist and work with runners and do kind of a sports medicine twist to your practice, you can. If you want to do pediatrics, I spent some time at McLean Children's working with Dr. Godin. That's all he sees, right? Is kiddos. So if you're wanting to do clubfoot casts every week and do a ton of ingrowns, because we know with pediatrics we have a ton of ingrowns, then you can take that twist. If you want to have a very heavy trauma surgical clinic or practice, work in an inpatient setting or an outpatient setting, that's the beauty of podiatry, I feel, is that you get to pick your field instead of go into the match. But then once you're in it, you also get to explore what that can look like for you. So
Well,
that's my 2 cents.
I like that 2 cents. Well, thank you. And Joe, anything else on your end?
No, I think that's a beautiful conclusion statement.
Well, me too. Well, to all of our listeners out there, if you're listening on Spotify or Apple, please give us a 5-star rating. And if you get a chance, leave a comment. And if you're watching on YouTube, by all means, become a subscriber. And until next week, everyone, cheers.
Cheers.